What's up, world? I'm Garin. I'm on a mission to talk to one person from every country in the world, and today I'm talking to Amaru from Bolivia. Amaru spent years, I think 10 years, traveling all around the world. He's lived in different places, but he's decided to go back to Bolivia and start a newspaper to highlight his country and to highlight the things that he loves most about the place that he's from. So I feel like his philosophy fits in so well with this project that he enjoys the differences between people and the differences in his own country, but at the end of the day, celebrates the fact that we're all fundamentally the same. So it was a lot of fun getting to talk to him. I think that you'll enjoy this conversation too. Here's Amaru from Bolivia.
Great. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you via Skype. How are you?
Doing great. Yeah, I can't remember who it was that told me about you, but they were like, oh, if you want an ambassador for Bolivia, you need to talk to Amaru. He's the guy.
Oh, brilliant. Well, happy to fill that role if it helps.
Yeah. So you said that you just got back from a big adventure, huh? It sounded like you were hacking your way through the jungle.
Yeah. I mean, that probably makes it sound more romantic than it was, but I was working in some remote rural communities for the past 2 weeks. I was helping out with this consultancy to do with voluntourism and social tourism and development in these kind of remote parts of the country that don't receive many visitors. Or if they do, it's usually people who turn up with a camera, take a few pictures and go, right? So it was about trying to create a more meaningful exchange between the locals and the people who were visiting.
Wow. So is this the kind of work that you normally do, or how did you get involved with this?
I don't know the kind of work I normally do. It's just one of these things. You know, I got back to Bolivia about a year ago after living 10 years, well, 8 years in the UK and 1.5 years in the States. And since I arrived, I've just been trying to find different things to do, but just taking it a day at a time and just doing whatever seems most interesting and most meaningful at that time. So in my day-to-day, I'm a journalist. So I run this organization called Bolivian Express, which is a magazine. It's an English language magazine distributed nationally in print, and we also have a website, so it reaches people abroad. But I do the odd piece of freelance journalism, I do the odd consultancy, I do some editing. You know, whatever's meaningful, as I say.
Cool. Is that what your background is? What did you do journalism in the UK and in the US?
No, I did my degree in the UK. I did it in politics, philosophy, and economics, a joint honours, but it was mainly philosophy. Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, when I left university, I felt quite useless. Like maybe I had explored a lot of it, big, important ideas in depth, but I couldn't do very much in a practical sense.
Yeah, people are like, we're not going to give you a paycheck to sit in a room and think about things.
No, exactly. Wow, so that was a big crisis, but I think it's more common in the UK. People don't do as many vocational degrees. You just do whatever you're interested in, and then you end up working in wherever, really. I have friends who've become bankers who studied Latin. You know, it's one of these strange things. But then I did a master's in social science of the internet.
Oh.
Yeah, that was super interesting. And again, that was just spur of the moment kind of idea that I was interested in. And that then led me to work in telecommunications. So then I started working for this big multinational, which was kind of exotic for me. You know, I worked for them for 2.5 years. They took me to the States. They took me over to Silicon Valley, and I was working in these things to do with strategy and innovation. And it was strange. Sometimes the analogy I give is that there are anthropologists from England who go and visit an Amazonian tribe to understand the other, the exotic, the unknown. And for me, that world of the corporation, that was the big unknown. That was the world that really wasn't in my DNA or in my background. So I did that until September last year, and I had already started Bolivian Express. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it kind of froze up on us, but hopefully it'll keep going here in a second. There we go.
Okay, yeah, we're back. So I did that till about September last year, maybe earlier. And one day I thought, I just need to go back to Bolivia. You know, it's time, because I had been for almost a decade abroad. I knew that this is where my roots were. This is where I want to live. And it's strange, you know, there are so many people trying to leave Bolivia. There are so many people with this American dream or a European dream, thinking, wow, I'm going to make it, and thinking you're a fool if you're living in Bolivia, if you can live abroad. But I guess it takes leaving the country and seeing it from the outside to learn that that's not necessarily the case,
Mm-hmm.
Things more important than, I guess, your earning capacity abroad or career development. There are things so meaningful and important that need to be done right now in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I, and my dad, the three of us went down to Chile and to Colombia. And when you say Colombia in the States, people are like, drugs and, cartels, and it's dangerous. Why in the world would you want to go to Colombia? And we were only there for a couple weeks, so it's not like, I got such a huge insight into the culture, but, the lifestyle was just beautiful there. And it's the same thing. People in America think kind of the same thing. We're at the top of the rung. Everybody else is kind of vying for position, but it's like, no, anywhere in the world, but especially in some of those Latin places, there's a flavor, and, it's not like, every place has strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And there's not so much a saying, but there's a phrase that's sometimes used here, which is nadie puede contártela. Nadie te la puede contar. So no one can tell you what it's like. You have to see it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think something I can find here is fulfillment, right? I can do something that's a reflection of my values and my principles, and a place and I feel associated with, and there's family and there's friends, and all of those things in the end outweigh whatever other opportunities, and it was great, and I feel really privileged to have been able to travel the world and live in other places and see what it's like, see it for what it is and what it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
The good and the bad sides. But even in Bolivia, I was traveling in these remote rural communities, and I met people who, we're not talking of these tribes who haven't contacted civilization, but people who really weren't part of any larger system. Maybe a small village where 7 or 8 families live,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no electricity, yet, their spirit really shines through. They can live. They certainly have needs. I think it would be too romantic to say, hey, they have a better life or they're happier, but they definitely found meaning in what they did. They were able to produce their own things. They were able to share a lot more time with each other, and they were quite happy, especially the older generations, just being there.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it's in our genes. When we're young, we want to travel, we want to see other things. We'll never be contented with what's given to us. But something else that occurred to me when I was in the States is there are so many people who are quite wealthy who were talking about their money problems.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there they were, living in a huge house, sending their kids to very expensive universities, 3 or 4 very nice cars. Yet they talk about, the stress of paying the bills. And I just couldn't help thinking to myself that these are problems that you've created for yourself, or maybe to take the blame away from them, it's I guess a consequence of living in a society which does demand you to pay mortgages, to be part of systems, to get health insurance. And my mum sometimes says bees have to move their wings very fast to stay still, right? And that's certainly something I feel when I'm in England or in the States, right? You just can't stop, because even just to stay where you are, you have to do so much. Sorry, I'm just gonna.
No problem.
Yeah, you have to. You have to work, and you have to not stop. And in Bolivia, at least, it's a place where you can take a bit more time off, because there are friends and there's a community that does, in the same measure, allow you to fall back on them,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time sometimes asks to fall back on you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's a lot of reciprocity.
Yeah.
I remember when I first moved to England, I have relatives there, and of course it was this big thing to think, oh no, where's he going to stay? He can come here for dinner or stay for a couple of days, but heaven forbid he wants to stay for a week or a month. Like, we just cannot accommodate you. And here in Bolivia, people would take it, if you had family, they would take it as an offense if you didn't go and live with them if you're moving to another city. think, what? You're not moving in with family? You think you're too good for us? And they'll make room in their living room. Maybe they'll make room for you in their own bedroom, and they'll share that space, and it might be limited. But you have that opportunity. And going back to the States, like, I knew people who wanted a lot of things. I want a $60,000 car. I want a $2 million house. And I remember thinking to myself, the moment I want a $60,000 car, I'll be $60,000 poorer without doing anything, because here is a material need which, within my current situation, I cannot fulfill. And it will exist in my life, not as a presence, but as a lack. It's something I don't have, right? And since coming to Bolivia, I mean, I wouldn't say I live in squalor or in the gutter or I go hungry, but I think I can live a lot more basically, and not find meaning in things, but in people and interactions and projects.
Yeah. I don't know what you would think about this, with everything that you've just said, and then like your experiences and things you've been a part of, but it seems to me like we're becoming really fascinated with kind of like a return to our roots, or like maybe kind of our primal origins. And an example, just to use a metaphor, would be like the Paleo Diet. People are interested in eating how the first humans lived. And it's kind of like this, we've come so far that we're kind of interested in figuring out where we came from, and a return to the basics. And that's obviously just an example of how we eat, but I think that same thing is happening in a lot of different parts of how we live. And some of the things that you mentioned, like in developed, like, first world countries, you don't rely on your family. Well, we're supposed to. Like, you're supposed to be a part of a strong community, and some people look at it as a big victory that I don't have responsibilities. I don't have somebody tying me down. I can do what I want. Well, that's what gives you fulfillment, is having people that rely on you, because we're here to support the people around us,
Completely.
Or like you said, fulfillment. It's a big victory to make all this money. And last week I was talking to a friend of mine who, he went the corporate route. Everybody told him, you need to wear a suit and tie to work, because that's what a successful person does. And, God forbid you ever thought about the trades, because, a vocational occupation is not, a high-class thing. Well, now he does that, and he has a corporate gig, and he said, what, I think I would gladly take a pay cut if I could work with my hands and say, look, I made this. See, I'm a carpenter. Maybe I don't make $100,000, but look, I'm a man and I made this. And I think that just kind of across the board in how we organize ourselves and how we live our daily lives and the jobs that we do, we're kind of attracted to our origins, and it'll be interesting to see in another decade. Maybe we kind of have a return to a more a simpler, smaller, community-based, artisanal kind of economy or something like that.
Yeah, I agree, and I can see it all around me. I mean, what you mentioned about the paleo diet, especially, I think it's a symptom, at least in developed societies, of an inner existential crisis, right? It's what people would say about the modern novel. It's a story of people or humanity fighting against itself, fighting against the products of its success, right? Thinking, no, I want to live more basically, even if all of these things are around me. Sometimes almost masochistically, right? Sometimes almost depriving yourself, yearning the feeling of necessity, yearning the feeling maybe of hunger or of unfulfillment, just because it's so easy to overdose, not only on food and material possessions, but on experiences. Let me tell you something about San Francisco when I lived there. I developed this theory, and I love San Francisco. Don't for a second think I don't. But it seemed to me like it was a super society, There was great food, the weather was, more or less good. There were people in industry and in creative professions who were doing amazing things, so it's almost like this model citadel. But because there were so many people who had been offered or had been promised so many things from life, people suffered from a deep sense of what I and other people call FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So, for example, if they went to a Vietnamese sandwich shop, they couldn't enjoy their sandwich because they'd always be thinking there must be a better Vietnamese sandwich out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd go on Yelp and they'd review the hell out of these places. They'd maybe spend 3 or 4 hours dissecting this actually very simple experience that maybe doesn't need to be verbalized. But everything needed to be optimistic, right? They felt an existential deficit, like the world owed them experiences. Right now, I want to go to the coolest festivals, and I want to go to these places, and I want to meet the coolest people. And then, of course, you had to go for interviews wherever you went to live, because there's such a shortage of accommodation. So, what are you interested in, and what do you eat, and where do you go on weekends? Just to have some roommates, you know. And although on the surface, and halfway down at least, it was brilliant, and I learned loads there. I did feel this deep crisis, this deep dissatisfaction, right? That no matter what you had, it was never going to be good enough. And here were people who had moved away from having material possessions. They were multimillionaire startup entrepreneurs who were living in warehouses or lofts, thinking, I don't need all of this. Fine, they had made that leap. But they still had this huge ambition, linked to the individual, not linked to the community. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Great. And, again, not to romanticize what it's like here, but people don't entertain the same concept of the narrative of their life, right? And the day-to-day importance of what they're doing, right? Sometimes they're just grateful to have a plate of food in front of them, grateful to have a small technological advance offered to them.
Mm-hmm.
But making things, I remember when I remember speaking to people when I was a lot younger, and I asked them, what do you do for a living? And they'd say, well, I work in this company. So what does your work involve? I knew what their company did, but what part do you do? Do you do the bolts? Do you do the wiring? And I said, well, no, I go to meetings. I said, what do you mean you go to meetings? How do you make a living? Oh yeah, of course I go to meetings. I meet with people and we talk and we make decisions. And that, to the 7-10-year-old brain just seems incredible. How do you go from words and conversations and emails to owning a house,
Mm-hmm.
right? To having a car that you can drive, to having so many material things around you that someone has created. So I feel in my own life that need to create things outside of myself, things that I can touch and that I can see. And let me see if I have one around here. So this is the magazine I produce, right? This is Bolivian Express. And I can touch it and I can show it to people and I can share it and it means something. I don't know, and although I wouldn't go as far as saying that what's virtual isn't real, I think it's a lot, in very obvious ways, less tangible.
Yeah. And I think people just really underestimate the power of that. The power of holding something. Like, this is a goofy example, but I went to Mali a number of years ago, and I volunteered with an organization there, and they had this big pile of lumber laying there, and we didn't have any place to eat. We had these benches, but every night we would make food, and we would just pull the plates on our laps and eat our food. So this one day I found some tools, and I cut up the lumber, and I built a big picnic table. It was big enough for about 10 people to sit at, so every night we could eat dinner together. And I was going through some pictures the other day looking for a certain picture, and I kind of just got stuck in nostalgia, and I was browsing through my old photos, and I saw this picture of all these kids drawing and coloring books, 6 years old, at the table that I built. And,
wow.
And I just thought, man, I've done some interesting and some things I'm proud of since then, but I was like, I don't know if I can think of anything as tangible in the last many years that I can look at like that, and see those kids on top of it and go, yeah, I made that. And people don't totally grasp the power of that, So, yeah, I wish that's something that I've been thinking a lot more about lately. And kind of going along with some of the things you were saying too, do you know about the Basque country in Spain and France?
Yes, of course.
So my family's Basque, and all of my great grandparents are from there. And one of my grandparents, my grandpa, he's the most recent one to come over. So he left when he was 16, and he packed up 2 suitcases, got on a boat. There were so many, I think there was like 12 kids or something, that the family couldn't feed him anymore. And they were going to give him to the church so that he would become a priest and they would feed him.
Wow.
And he said, I'm not the church, I'm not the priest material, the priest type, you know. So he packs up 2 suitcases, gets on a boat, goes to America, doesn't speak English, doesn't know anybody, and he became a sheep herder. And,
Wow.
And that's, you know, how he just made a new life for himself. And I think in the last few years I've figured out a lot of things for myself, and I have a more, fulfilled lifestyle, I guess. But there was a while where I was pretty restless, and kind of like what you were saying, for me it was always travel. I was like, well, if I go do this adventure, then that means something. And if I go here, and if I do this, and if I have these crazy stories, that's what matters in my life. And I started thinking, you know, my grandpa never thought about that. You know, he didn't want to go to America so that he could show that he had done this adventurous, enormous thing. For him, it was about survival, you know, and he never found meaning in, you know, wild, crazy, unique things. For him, his meaning was feeding his kids the way that his parents couldn't feed him, you know, and he wasn't any less happy than I am. He's probably more happy than I am, you know, and he didn't ever lament the fact that he was a sheep herder, you know. For him, that was his role in life, was being a provider, you know, and I just think a lot about how much we have, like just the same thing that you're saying. Materially, we have so much, but we're not necessarily any richer than generations past, or maybe, like you said, people in rural Bolivia, you know, who have a different set of possessions, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and what you were saying earlier about the returning to your roots, I think again it's almost tribal, right? It's something in our nature as well that sometimes we want to discover. Whatever our tribe means. It could be the neighborhood where you grew up, it could be a country, it could be an ideology, it could be a football team, right? But we seek out these groups of people, or with all of its iconography and with all of its meaning. And sometimes people you have no relation to. Like, of course, I can say I love Bolivia, and I can say that I'm committed to building a life for myself and to doing something for this country. Yet so many people in this country are alien to me. They have such different worldviews. You know, it's this thing that exists in my head, but they're still a construct of my roots.
Yeah.
In some sense, and that's maybe sufficient. And another thing, you know, when you were talking about your granddad being a provider, and that being his sense of fulfillment in life, and maybe his source of pride, that's something I've realized through the magazine as well, in a different way, that to find real meaning, maybe you have to look outside of yourself. Right? I've seen people who've been going through very serious personal crises, you know, maybe teenagers who were not too careful with what they were doing and suddenly ended up pregnant and suddenly had a kid. And of course, it's super difficult, it's stressful as hell, go through very difficult times, but all of a sudden their life has meaning. You know, at least they don't feel that there's no reason for them to be on this planet. Right?
Yeah.
They exist for someone else, and that keeps them strong. They can't afford to be weak because another life depends on them. And okay, I mean, I don't have kids, but I feel that having this organization, right, which produces something that I hope is valuable to society, that there's an expectation that it comes out and it's free, and it gives meaning to me, you know, and I don't let myself get low. I don't let myself wallow in my own problems, because I think, some friends and I have created something that's much bigger than ourselves, right? Something that will probably outlive us, I hope.
Yeah.
You know? And it's in a sense, having a company or having a small organization of this kind is like having a child.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's a little version of a legacy, like you said, something that you are going to leave behind. This is a subject that I've been coming back to more recently, and I'd like to explore it more because so on my website I talk a lot about big, high-level problems, because I talk to people from around the world, and there's so many issues facing our world, and for me to get off on a little bit of a rant, the reason why it's so applicable is because in the United States, and I don't know what your impression was when you lived there, but we're like afraid of the whole world. We look at the whole world through this lens of the war on terror. Who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, and there's all these people that hate us for our freedom. And as a result, we have a government that spies on all of our communications. They lock up journalists for speaking out against what's going on, all to keep us safe because the world is so dangerous. And I just want to show people that that's not true. The world is a whole lot more people like you and me than it is any dangerous, nefarious people. But in any case, the point is, I talk about these really big, high-level issues, but I'm coming back to the point where we can't expect more out of our world and out of our countries until we expect more out of ourselves. So just like you said, here we have these people who have kind of these existential problems in their lives and these very real issues of a lack of meaning and fulfillment and purpose. Why am I even here? So many people can't answer that question. Why am I even here?
Yeah.
So how can we hold our collective organizations, our countries, and our world to higher standards until we don't hold ourselves to those? So, and it's just some of the things like you're talking about. It's just as simple as creating meaning for yourself.
Yeah, and learning from each other, right? We have a lot more in common with people around the world than we have things that set us apart. And a lot of the time, it's these superstructures that we live under that force us into not only seeing ourselves as different, but seeing ourselves as enemies, right? Thinking in terms of allies and enemies, or maybe that's a tribal thing as well. But like if you got me thinking, what does Bolivia have to teach to the world, or what does Bolivia have to show or share with the world? And there's a concept that's been used here by various people. It's been used politically in some respects, but it's been used more spiritually and more philosophically in others. It's a concept called summa camania, S-U-M-A, camania with a Q, Q-A-M-A-N-A,
Okay.
summa camania. And summa camania is a word in Aymara, one of the native languages of Bolivia, which means living well, right? And living well is contrasted with living better, right? It says
Not
living
bad,
well.
but living better.
Yeah, it says to live well, you need to live in harmony with the people around you, with Mother Nature. You need to live within your community. Living well is not living with a lot. It's living with just what's necessary. And that's an ideal that's been promoted nationally, right? And it's contrasted to living better because that's certainly something that's prevalent not just in the States, but in the UK. If you ask someone, would you rather have $10,000 or would you rather have $10,000 and everyone else has $5,000, or would you rather have $20,000 and everyone else has the same as you? And a lot of people, for them, status means showing that you're better, showing that you're more as an individual, right? So this is in contrast with living better. And you might find this interesting, but in Bolivia we have a vice ministry of decolonization, right? It's an official appointed person. In this case, it's Felix Cardenas. He has some crazy ideas, but we interviewed him for the magazine a few months ago, and he said some very interesting things. And I was just looking up the article, and I'd like to share some quotes that he shared with me that I think taught me a lot. He said, "We are in agreement that we're after a new way of living, a new civilizatory paradigm. That's what's under discussion. There are people who think we need to build a form of communitarian socialism or Andean capitalism. We propose not one nor the other, but rather to take ourselves as a starting point. The name is not important, but rather what we're after, a new type of society. We want to understand conceptually what it is that we want as a country. Bolivia has been a country without an identity, a failed state that has tried to be modern. We're not seeking a modern society. We're looking for a postmodern one. It's crazy, right? From a government official. He says, for me, living well is a consequence rather than an objective. It will only come into effect when there's true interculturality, when we can be proud of who we are and be strengthened in our identity. Socialism and capitalism are Siamese twins. The only thing they concern themselves with is managing capital. Those on the right want the market to control it. Those on the left want the state to be responsible. Yet they're both industrializing and predatory. Identity involves our capacity to strengthen ourselves. We cannot continue projecting the image of impoverished Bolivian indios searching among the rubbish, asking Europe for help. It's to exploit the poverty of these people instead of showing their lives and worldviews. Communitarian tourism would involve an equal exchange. For an English family, for example, to live alongside a Guarani family, and for this process to be managed by the family itself. I believe that we have to show the world that we're not a museum piece, we're a reality. For 500 years they have tried to make us disappear, but we're saying here we are, and moreover we are. Insofar as identities are weak, they will always run the risk of being penetrated and distorted. We mustn't fear globality. Just because I'm Aymara, it doesn't mean I'm condemned to only dancing to my own music. That would be to close myself out. It's precisely because I know who I am that I can dance to rock and roll better than any rock and roller. I could live in New York City, but I don't stop being Aymara. And then the last line he gave me, he says, we're like a flower that's blooming after a long winter. I think our indigenous communities offer hope to the rest of the world. We have a philosophy to share. In the same way they came to evangelize us and show us a new way of life, today we have a mission to evangelize the rest of the world, to show them that there's a different way to live.
Whoa. That's
cool,
really
no?
cool. Yeah. Man, I like that for so many reasons. You know, I've said not so eloquently, but that you know, in our world, and especially in my country, a lot of the problems that we're facing are extremely profound. You know, they're so deep, and it goes down to the very core of government and the subjects of how we organize ourselves and what it means to be a human. So you can't have superficial solutions to profound problems. You know, you can't say, okay, well, the system is broken, so let's, you know, the solution is vote in better politicians. That's a superficial solution to a profound problem. You can't, that's not going to solve the problem because the system itself is broken, you know? So the solution has to be equally profound, and it has to be a solution on the most core level. Like, what does it mean to be a human, you know? And
Exactly.
how should we organize our society to begin with? Like that guy said, we're not trying to catch up to the modern society. We're trying to create the postmodern. And he's the same thing. He's like, we don't care about your broken system. We want to completely rethink what does it even mean to live together. You know, we're going to draw a line on the map and we're all going to be on this side of the line. What does that mean? You know, how is that going to look in our daily lives? That's so cool that there's somebody doing that exact same thing. You know, he's like, let's find profound solutions to profound problems.
Yeah, it's very inspiring and it's inspiring that he's empowered institutionally, right, by a government. Because governments, I know it's a thin line between telling people how to live and making it possible for them to make their choices. There's that big debate between liberty and, I guess, equality. And states do run the risk of being paternalistic and being authoritarian if they try and define the kind of lives that people should seek. But I think it's definitely a positive step that there's a government official, senior government official, who gets to be a philosopher, right? Gets to try and think about things from scratch, as you say, looking for deep solutions to fundamental problems that we face, not even as a country, right? As humanity.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hopeful that some of these messages will land on the right ears, both nationally and internationally, and that it will change, even if it changes a couple of people's way of thinking. It's still a big deal, you know?
Yeah. I really liked what he said about the rock and roll thing, and I can't remember the name of his ethnicity or the Manya or
Aymara.
Aymara.
Yeah.
You know, and how he can be an Aymara anywhere. And I have a section on my website that's called the Manifesto, and it's kind of like my attempt at establishing kind of a philosophy that people can all share in. And that's one thing that I think that people need to realize is that, you know, you being proud of your culture is not a threat to my culture. Like, who you are is not a threat to who I am. And it's the opposite. That you being empowered to be you and to be proud and to celebrate that allows me to be proud and to celebrate who I am. And we need to get to a point where we support each other, that we you see the fact that we're connected, you know. And when I see you celebrate who you are, and you know, you have this magazine that promotes the best parts about your culture and the things that you're proud of, that's a victory for everybody, you know. And I know it sounds like a, you know, crazy hippie kind of mentality, but that's it's like the tide rises all boats, you know.
Yeah.
We have to support ourselves by supporting each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you completely.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great initiative you have.
I'd be interested to know what some of the projects you've worked on recently in your magazine that you've been, you know, particularly excited about.
Okay, so I will get my latest issue, actually, which is very relevant. So it's an issue on roots.
Oh.
Right? In the broader sense, we for each issue we pick a word or a concept and we try and give it the broadest interpretation we can. And here we have a picture we took of a potato, right? Which is it's a crop which defines Bolivia.
Okay.
We have the greatest variety of potatoes around the world, and when the colonizers came in the 15th century, that's one of the first things they took back, right? And which marked the history of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's one of the major crops on which the world now lives.
I didn't learn about that until just a couple weeks ago. You know, we always think about like the Irish being the potato people, but it's not indigenous to Europe, huh?
It came from here.
Yeah.
And in this issue, so we've had the privilege to have some very interesting people come and work with us. So this girl called Katie Stahl, she was born in Bolivia, but she was abandoned on the steps of a bank here in Bolivia, in Oruro. And they picked her up and they took her to a children's home. And then she was adopted by an American family. And aged 6 months old, she went to the States, and she lived there with her family. And she came back for the first time in 19 years. For the first time in her life, she came back to where she's from.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote this really beautiful piece called Lost and Found, where she retraces the steps her parents took and goes back to that same orphanage she came from, goes back to that bank where she was left when she was a 3-month-old child. Wow, and it's a very, very powerful story about your roots.
Neat.
You know, she even went to the National Library and found the newspaper of around those months where there was an ad in the paper saying that this child has been lost, you know, looking for its parents. So you can see the newspaper clipping there.
Whoa.
Yeah, so she's tried to piece together her life through a story that she can share with other people. Then we have an article about Sumacamaña, written by this girl from the Philippines called Ryle, who also spent a couple of months with us. Now, I don't know whether I explained this, but we have a strange and interesting business model as part of the magazine, right? Because we could not survive if it was just through advertising. A number of magazines have tried, and especially because we want to produce a high quality, glossy, colourful magazine, high production value. That, as I say, we want it to be free, and of course we have no sources of local income. So what we do is we organise journalism training programs for people who come from abroad. Right. So we don't call them internships because in reality, it's a lot more resource intensive to help someone from outside produce a piece than it is to pay a professional journalist to write it for you, right? But we offer them, production and interpreters, and we try and give them all of the support and infrastructure needed for them to write a piece from them, right? To be able to see Bolivia from the outside, and then to publish it. And with the money that they pay, we subsidize the cost of printing the magazine.
So if somebody's like a journalism student in the U.S. and they go, okay, for a semester I'm going to go down and hang out with Amaru and his guys, and then I'll have something to show.
Exactly,
cool.
Exactly, and we give them all the editorial support, so that they can publish something solid, something well researched, so that they can learn in the process. But also what we're looking is to create ambassadors of Bolivia, right? Because I've met so many people abroad who have been to Bolivia, but maybe they have had such a superficial tourist experience that they say, oh, I know your country. And I say, okay, well, tell me about my country. What did you see? Well, I saw the Salar de Uyuni, I saw the monolitos, you have such a beautiful country. And I said, well, did you talk to anyone there? Did you learn what problems these people have, or what things they have to share with the world? And they'd say, well, no, I haven't. So that's what we want. Those are the kind of interactions we want to create. We want to allow people who are completely alien to the society to come in and really be able to have a genuine experience, and to be able to share it with the world through the article and through the magazine. And that's what we're about.
So obviously, if somebody's watching this right now, we're several steps removed from their ability to do that. But what kind of, I don't know, do you have any stories that pop out into your mind that you could tell somebody to go, this is what encapsulates Bolivia? If you want to know what Bolivia is all about, this is what it means to me. Or do you have anything like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I know what Bolivia means to me, and it's definitely not the monolitos or the salar or the beautiful scenery, which I don't know if I'm entitled to be proud of that, because I'm not a part of it. It's just given to us there. It's in nature. But to me, Bolivia means chaos. Well, at least my city, La Paz, right? It means chaos. It means strange smells on the streets. It means cables and wires tangled up on the lamppost. It means sometimes bureaucracy. It means people being late for meetings. And despite all of those things, it means piracy. All of those things which sound very negative and scary, and people would think, like, hell, I'm not visiting that country. That's what's beautiful about this place, is that you can love something so weird and such a weird mix. There's a lot of syncretism here, right? So the part of the country that I identify with is precisely these culture clashes, because I'm a product of them. My mother's English, my father's Bolivian. My mother came from a very well-to-do family in England, probably quite snobbish, and my dad came from a very indigenous family here, where my grandmother wore a pollera and she was a coffee farmer. And it's at least the city is defining its identity through these contradictions, through these things which are irreconcilable. But you join them together and you create this kind of Frankenstein. You create a new thing that has its own new meanings. And wow, there's this beautiful bar just down the road called La Costilla de Adán, no? Adam's Rib. And it was featured in the New York Times as a great place to visit in La Paz. And people have called it a tribute to Andean pop, right? It's incredibly kitsch. It has all of these things that, a lot of locals, things that a lot of locals snub and don't identify with them. They think, oh no, that's so cheesy. That's in such bad taste. But a lot of the time, tourists come and they see these things and they think, wow, this is incredible. And people here get obsessed with one of the biggest flea markets, maybe in the world, but definitely the biggest one in South America. It's called La Feria 16 de Julio, and it extends over miles and miles. And basically, part of this city called El Alto, which is next to La Paz, becomes a market, right? Because everyone sells and everyone buys things. Everyone's in that exchange, right? And they can find the weirdest clothes that were probably donated by someone in the States in the 1980s. It's like it can seem very hipstery, right? But it's completely unintentional, right? They're not being sold as, wow, buy these cool clothes to be in with the European crowd. This is what a lot of locals just buy because it's the clothes that arrive into the country.
Mm-hmm.
So you see sometimes old ladies walking around with Nirvana t-shirts. You know, maybe they will never know who Kurt Cobain was, but those are just the clothes they wear, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what's beautiful about this place.
Mm-hmm.
That weird, really weird mix between. It's a place that refuses to be modern, right? As that vice minister said, it's a very postmodern place. It's completely wacky.
Cool. That's a pretty awesome sales pitch. I'll have to come down to Bolivia.
Oh, you need to come. It's such a wonderful place, and it's very cheap as well. That's a good selling point. Once you arrive, you know, you pay for your ticket. You can live with very little here. Food from all around the world. People are still interested. You know, I don't want to badmouth any other country or anything, but I've seen places like Cusco that have been so invaded by tourists that it's completely transformed everything. Right? It's transformed the vision of the locals, who, when they see blonde people walking on the street, they just see dollar signs. You can see dollar signs in their eyes because that's what it's a sad consequence of what that place has become. But here culture and a lot of these things are still more or less intact, you know, and they still need to be shown to the world. But let's just hope let's just hope people come to Bolivia seeking out those kinds of experiences and not seeking out beaches because we don't have them, we're landlocked, not seeking out casinos because we probably wouldn't do it very well, but trying to find something different, you know?
Yeah. That's something that I would like people to, I don't know, appreciate more, I guess, because when we were in Colombia, so my dad, just being that he's older, I'm not going to say that he's not adventurous, because he's totally adventurous. Like, him and I, we rode motorcycles from America all the way down to Panama together.
Wow.
And he's a totally adventurous guy, but he's just, I kind of maybe seek it out a little bit more, you know, and I'm always like, oh my gosh, you know, I went to Vietnam, and I didn't see any of the major sites, I didn't go to any of the big places, but my motorcycle broke down out in the countryside, and I had dinner with this family on Easter Sunday that happened to be Catholics, and we killed a goose, and cooked up this big meal, and we were drinking homemade whiskey at noon and getting drunk and doing martial arts in the living room, and it was this crazy thing. So I seek that kind of stuff out, you know. The point is, we went to South America, we went to Chile and Colombia, and my dad, you know, he sees all the noise and the traffic and the commotion, and he was like, man, it's kind of chaotic here, you know, there's a lot of chaos. And I said, exactly, and that's what's amazing. I love the chaos, you know, because in where we're from, things have their own little box, and everything's nicely organized, and everything's neatly arranged, and it's just very organized, I guess. And I like that chaos, you know, that's where you have the opportunity to kind of get in the cracks of the chaos and really soak up stuff, you know, and learn about a place, or maybe even for you as an entrepreneur, like that chaos allows you the opportunity to find your space to fit in and produce something.
Yeah, to create from chaos. You know, don't fight it, join it.
Mm-hmm.
Be part of the chaos.
Yeah, for sure. So, I don't want to take up, you know, your whole day here, but are there any subjects that you know, whether it be personal, philosophical things or things about Bolivia, are there anything that we need to cover before we're done?
Let me have a quick think. I'd like to share something that means a lot to me in this context. And it was given to me by my mother a few years ago. and it's actually in Nahuatl. Nahuatl, from the Altiplanicia Mexicana, from the Mexican highlands.
Okay.
There's this old culture, and they have a song that I found in a compilation that my mum gave me, as I say, and it's called El Canto Nahuatl a la Vida Efímera, the Nahuatl song to ephemeral life, right? And it goes, I'll first say it in Spanish, because that's the language I know it in. So it says, en un solo día se nos va nuestra vida, en un día llegamos, en una noche bajamos, a la región del misterio. Solo estamos de paso en la tierra, solo hemos venido a conocernos. En paz y placer vivamos, que no lo hagan los que viven angustiados. Ancho es el mundo, vasta es la tierra. Ojalá viviera para siempre, ojalá nunca tuviera que morir. Mientras vivimos, con el alma rota, aquí nos acechan, aquí nos espían. Pero a pesar de las desdichas, no hay que vivir en vano. Ojalá viviera para siempre, ojalá nunca tuviera que morir. So now I'll translate it. So I hope I can do this simultaneously and my brain doesn't fry up. But it goes, in a single day we arrive, in a single night we descend to the region of mystery. We're only passing through Earth. We have only come here to meet one another. Let's live in peace and harmony. Let not those who live in anger and resentment. The world is vast, the earth is wide. I wish I could live forever, I wish I never had to die. While we live, they spy on us, they prey on us. But even with a broken soul, we must learn that we must not live in vain. I wish I could live forever, I wish I never had to die. So for me that's really beautiful, because it's this deep ancestral knowledge which is just so wise. There's so much wisdom in that phrase, at least for me, that we've come here to Earth to meet one another, right? We're just passing through Earth, and if we don't do that, if we don't meet people from other cultures and from other places, people different to ourselves, then we're kind of wasting that life. So that's something that means something to me.
Yeah. How cool is it too that, like you said about that ancestral knowledge, here's something that's come from generations and it's still applicable today. You can hear that and you go, wow, that resonates inside of me. I understand that. It's just a human emotion.
Yeah, so that's, I think, what I have to share. I'd invite anyone seeing this or reading about it to read the magazine if they want to learn about different aspects of Bolivia that are not traditionally covered in the international press, not to do with planes being hijacked and presidents and treatises. We just try to write about people and find big stories and maybe small situations or in small characters, seemingly small. And also, I'll be giving a TEDx talk tomorrow, which is probably the reason that Christian put you in touch with me, and it will be about Bolivian Express. The title of the talk is The Accidental Entrepreneur, right? So I'm going to talk about how Bolivian Express is almost like an unwanted child, because I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. There was never in my life plans. It kind of I screwed up. It happened by accident. But even though at times in the past it did become a burden, it becomes something that I owed responsibilities to. Today it gives me meaning and fulfillment, right? So it's not about, I earn 20 times less than I used to earn now, but I'm so much happier. I'm so much happier here because I can be supporting this project, which is maybe no longer in its infancy. Maybe it's an adolescent company or project or organization now. So that's what I want to talk about.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. There's so much going on in my head, like we could probably talk about this stuff for a long time. But if people want to read the magazine, can they find it online?
They can find it online, yeah.
What is it? BolivianExpress.com?
BolivianExpress.org.
.org. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll put a link to that on the show notes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And
I just have one last question
yeah,
for you, and
please,
this might be the
please.
same thing as what you just shared, but I like to end this. I ask everybody this question: if you had the opportunity to share one message with the whole world, if you could have everybody's ears for just 1 second, what message would you want to impart to people?
Let me think about this for some 10 or 15 seconds,
Yeah, go for it.
if you'd allow me that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to share with the world that the message that uh, that life is the search for meaning. That's what life is, and the closest thing to success or happiness or whatever thing it is you value can be found through searching for that meaning and trying to be in the world the embodiment of something that means something to you. Paradoxically, we're able to feel most content and most alive when we give to the world the thing that perhaps we need the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
So find something that you want, find something that's lacking in your life and try and give that to the world. In my case, it's been to try and create a bridge between two cultures which have very little to do with one another, right? Between England or between the English-speaking world and Bolivia. And through that, through which I think is, well, Bolivian Express and this project is something I am, right? It's almost the embodiment. It's a material embodiment of something spiritual to me, right? And in the same way that I'm surprised that sometimes the less people have, the more they're prepared to give. I think it's a message that everyone needs to carry with them. Give what you don't have. Always give what you don't have and what you most need.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure speaking to you today, and I hope it's not the last time. And
Yes, absolutely.
if citizen diplomacy can ever be of service to Bolivian Express, please let me know.
Absolutely. I'm sure we can find things that we can work on together. And yes, and congratulations on your project. I think it's wonderful what you're doing.
My thing is just pretty much the exact same thing. Just creating opportunities for people to see each other's faces. So yeah, if we can ever collaborate, let's do it.
Brilliant. Well, all the best.
You as well.
Saludos, amigo, from Bolivia.
All right. Talk to you
Ciao,
later.
ciao.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Amaru. If you liked it, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like on Facebook, follow on Twitter, and check back soon for more conversations with interesting people from around the world. Thanks.